Welcome back to part 2 of PageSpeed video series. Today we're going to be talking about SSR or server-side rendering. My name is Eva. I'm the technical SEO of Reddico, and we have here with us Ainsley, who's the senior software engineer and the creator of Verbis, the CMS we're using at Reddico, and the most awesome CMS it is out there, or it will be out there. Hello, Ainsley. How are you today?
I'm very well. You?
I'm good. Are we ready to talk about server-side rendering and beloved JavaScript in yet one more time?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we're actually looking forward to it because our love for JavaScript knows no limits. So let's just straight dive into it. I'm just going to give a very, top-level analysis of what server-side rendering or SSR is. Basically, SSR is used for websites that they rely heavily on JavaScript. And it's a populated version of the website or the page on the server, which actually makes the whole rendering process way faster. I'm going to give it to you, though, to basically say why SSR is important and go further techie into it.
Absolutely, yeah. So thanks for that, Eva. Yeah, no. So I think it's important to understand the process of rendering and what rendering is before we sort of digest what client and server side is. So rendering is just literally the process of populating templates with HTML or text. So that can come from APIs or databases or CMSs. And it can happen either on the server side, which is the server, the VM that's running or the computer that's running in the cloud, or on the client side, which is the client's browser, Chrome, Firefox. So it allows for rich data to be displayed in HTML. That's all it is. Client side is a dynamic rendering method. Content's rendered using JavaScript or framework, which I'll touch on later, and it's passed dynamically. So when you go onto a website with client side rendered, there's little content there just because it's being populated by JavaScript. Server-side rendering, traditional sort of route. So when you request a page, all of the server does the heavy lifting. So it will go and grab stuff from a database, it will go and get all of this stuff, and then the user or the search engine will see all of that lovely content. Whether that's dynamic coming from a CMS or static, but it's coming from the server. So in this essence, the only thing that the client needs to do is download images, styles and JavaScript. It doesn't have to do much.
Right.
With regards to like Google crawling, or Google or search engine, when they crawl it, just send a normal HTTP GET request to the site to retrieve the markup. It then goes on to proceed to render the JavaScript. So in essence, it's got two versions now. It's got one with the server side rendered content and one with the client side rendered content. And because Google or search engines, they have sort of crawl budgets in mind. On large sites, it can cause crawl budget issues, and that can slow search engines down by a considerable amount. I guess the sort of takeaways is that it's important to understand that there's not an infinite bucket of crawl budget for search engines, and if you're populating content through JavaScript, that content might not be picked up on that particular wave of indexing. We need to, and the developers need to focus on JavaScript to progressively enhance the page and not detract from it, such as animation, but not content and markup. Content and markup is really important to render on the server, so that we can display that lovely content to search engines. So that's sort of a top level intro into SSR. But yeah.
Thank you. That's actually really helpful, and that's something that we actually touched upon on the previous video as well. That especially when it comes to ranking factor elements within the page, we really just discourage having those on JavaScript because of what you actually mentioned, and that's why I think that it's important to know more about SSR. Now, when I first started, learning about JavaScript SEO and SSR, I would always hear like a noscript fallback and noscript fallback, and that was the day that I came and asked you what is the noscript fallback and why it's important. I would like you to tell us why, what is noscript fallback, why is it's important, and can it be used in both SSR and client-side rendering?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question, actually. Yeah, I love the noscript fallback. I think it's got magical powers, and I think it's one of the most powerful HTML elements, particularly for SEO. So it is, as I said, it is just an HTML element that you pop content inside it. That content will render only if there's no JavaScript enabled on the browser. So it's a great way of telling Google, or again, a search engine, what content you've got if you're populating that content via JavaScript. So if you've got a H1, for example, that's being inserted by JavaScript on the client side, you might want to tell, search engine, what is that H1 via a noscript tag. So that means it can see on that first wave of indexing what that H1 contains. So it's important to know that they do crawl the content inside noscript elements, but it has to be the same. If you've got content that's populated by JavaScript and your noscript tags are completely different, you might, it might detract and fall in ranking. So it's important to know that they need to be the same. It's not just content that you can use noscript fallbacks for. Like imagery and styles is amazing. Imagery, the lazy loading natively is just coming into all major browsers. But in essence, we used to have to add a noscript tag and put the image in when so when you're when you're scrolling down, it will still show. And also styles as well. You can have a CSS file that's just specifically for Node.js styles. So when you go on the page and you disable JavaScript, it looks exactly the same. And that's what it should do. It should look exactly the same. So yeah, really powerful. I love it. It is great, noscript, but yeah.
No, I have to admit, I actually love it too, because the first thing that I see the SEOs will do is when they have like a website, they're just going to disable JavaScript to see what the issue is without JavaScript. And ever since we started discussing more about noscript fallback, every time that I would just click on disable JavaScript, I would just say noscript fallback, noscript fallback. Every time then it actually became my very, very favorite as well. And it's really easy to understand, from an SEO point of view as well. Because if you can understand it, then you can very easily explain it on why it's important, the before and after to be quite similar. So yeah, thank you. That was actually very, very clear and very, very helpful. Now I'm going to move on to a little bit of a vague question that a lot of SEOs are asking. And it is, what are the most common blockers in terms of SSR implementation? Which I can understand that it is quite vague and it depends on a lot of factors. But it's something that not only I ask, but I actually hear quite often. And I would like you to, to explain a little bit better.
That was a great question. So I think the most common blocker for implementing SSR is really the tech stack or the company they choose to use. It really comes down to like what the developers are using and whether or not that content relies on an external API or anything else for rendering markup. A lot of websites use CMS, but so in that case, it's really important to use the right one. One that implements SSR natively. A lot of developers use frameworks. So framework is just a library of helper code. It is just simply that. It's a really nice way to develop. It's really easy. But because of that, it's relying on JavaScript. And I think we've all seen where if you go to a site and disable JavaScript and you see that please enable JavaScript to see this page. That's all coming from a framework like React or Vue. Don't get me wrong, they're absolutely amazing for backend SPAs, metrics and that sort of stuff. But for a front-end application or front-end website with ecom and something that you're wanting to rank, it's a bit difficult. And I think that this is a very modern problem, SSR. It's not just come from, I don't think it was around a few years ago, but it's when these frameworks came about and you're able to put in content really easily for the developers, That's when it's become a problem. You can actually use like server-side rendering techniques for SPAs. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to rule them out completely. So you can use NUT or Vite. Basically, instead of when you go to a browser and you download the assets or download the markup, you can build the HTML and content at compile time and then deploy it to the server. So that means that you're effectively getting SSR, but it's built in a framework. When a search engine, sees that the DOM is being changed by CSS or JS, it sees or it checks to see if there's any additional information that's been added. If the links or content are added by JavaScript, it will be downweighted in their performance and have a less positive effect on rankings. Example of this is like links. They won't pass any weight at all to the page if they're linking to a generated JS link.
Exactly.
Then will be considered as a secondary style if it's populated by a JS. So again, like I'd stress that it's really easy to use JavaScript, but only use it when you really have to. It should be used for animation and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, and I can actually testify to that. Using JavaScript to basically populate content, especially when it comes to links as well, is one of the reasons that SEOs can really cry about. I 100% agree with you on that. So I think that the very fair answer to ask for that question is that it really depends. In terms of the blockers, it really, really depends on the infrastructure and on a number of other things, just to see how we can implement SSR, because I think it's important, to be noted, mostly because, a lot of people might actually think that it's just one way to implement SSR, whereas it's a little bit more complicated than that, but absolutely essential, in my opinion. So I have another very, very, very good question for you, if you can answer quite easily. Apart from the blockers of implementing SSR, how can developers implement SSR easily then? What is the way for you that it's the easiest to implement server-side rendering?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'd like to touch on progressive enhancement. So progressive enhancement is really used, I think it's used in design originally, but it's a strategy in web design or development that puts sort of emphasis on the content before anything else. So the user should be able to access the basic functionality of a web page before anything else, to consider anything. And that's something, like you said, with these blockers, that needs to be considered from the very beginning, because if your data it's a logistical nightmare. So I've seen a lot of and witnessed a lot of developers using JavaScript at like every opportunity. So it's really important to use the right tech stack when you're starting that build. Again, like I said, the right CMS for the job, and something that's not JS heavy. It can be tricky to add SSR, but it can be done on a pre-existing website. So like I said before, we can use that noscript tag to put in content that is displayed to search engines that resembles that JS content. Dynamic rendering as well, that's been quite popular in the last few years. It's a way to serve content just to bots. So user goes to a page, they see a really pretty interactive page that's been built on JS or around JS, but dynamic rendering is a middleman. What happens is it will only serve the rendered page to the search engine. So if you're a bot, you get a different page to the one that your users experience. So your user's still getting a full, rich experience, but the search engine is getting the fully rendered content page. That's a very clever way of implementing it. An example of this would be prerender.io. It's becoming quite popular, and that's exactly what it is. Dynamic rendering. It's using, you have to change a few DNS records and set everything up, but it's a very clever way of implementing SSR very easily.
That's actually a great shout, because I recently just dived into prerender.io, and I found it like a quite easy way of implementing SSR if again, like the website and the client meet the criteria for us to go down that route. Just depends. It's one of the reasons that I really like server-side rendering, because it's the perfect opportunity for a developer and SEO to just work together, ask the right questions, and find what's the best possible solution of actually implementing SSR. Thank you so much for your time and for explaining a little bit better what seems to be the second scariest thing after JavaScript. It was really useful.
No
and
worries.
I'm definitely scared of server-side rendering, just a little bit less now.
Thank you.